G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kaitlyn and I'm an American living in beautiful Sydney, Australia. So on the 15th of November, I applied for the next stage of my partner visa. It is a long, confusing, expensive, time-consuming process, you guys. But I've had so many people ask me questions about what the process involves, how long it takes, how much it costs, do I get Medicare? There's so much to it, so I wanted to just a little video breakdown of what my former visa / my current visa that I'm on actually involves, what my next partner visa involves, what about permanent residency, what about citizenship, bridging visas, the works. So I'm going to make sure that everything is timestamped below, so if there's just something in particular you want to see, I will make sure that that is clearly indicated in the little timestamps below, you guys. So grab a bicky, grab a cuppa, and let's talk about my partner visa. So just as a little disclaimer, I'm not an immigration agent, I'm not an immigration lawyer, I'm not a solicitor, I am not somebody to go to for legal advice when it comes to visas. I will link a wonderful YouTube channel down below called Salva Migration, who I have used for my prospective marriage visa. I use them for this visa, and they have so much information. It's a law firm that dedicates themselves to specifically partner visas. They know all about these kinds of visas, you guys, so I will link their YouTube channel down below. You guys can go check that out after you've seen this video. And from there you can find their actual website and whatnot. If you have any questions or if you need any sort of migration assistance or advice, go check them out. I highly recommend them. So I tried to film this before. This is the second time that I'm filming this video and it was so rambly. There's so much information that I wanted to make sure this is clear and concise for you guys. So this first section, let's talk about my current visa, which is the Subclass 300 Prospective Marriage Visa. So in order to get this visa, you have to be abroad when you apply for it. You can't be on Australian shores when you're applying for this visa. That you have to be 18 years or older. You can't be related by blood to the person who is sponsoring you, and the sponsor has to be either an Australian citizen, permanent resident, or a New Zealand citizen. I applied for my partner visa while COVID was going on at the end of August 2020, and on August 5th, 2021, my prospective marriage visa was approved. So given COVID and whatnot, I can understand the delays, but we weren't too fussed about that getting granted right away because of two reasons. One, it happened during border closures, and the prospective marriage visa was the only partner visa, the only one that did not have an exemption to fly over to Australia up until they changed the rules in September of 2021, a year and a half after Australia shut their borders. There was a lot of issue and a lot of controversy around that. They changed the rules, and when they did, I was able to book a flight and fly over. I came over to Australia on the 6th of December 2021. Second reason we weren't in a rush for this visa to get granted is because obviously it's a prospective marriage visa, sometimes called a fiancé visa or a PMV for short. With this visa, obviously, you're required to marry your sponsor. That's the way it works. So typically you have 9 months to enter Australia from the day that the visa is granted, and then you can get married anywhere in the world after you enter Australia. It's easier to get married in Australia because the immigration office is pretty familiar with the paperwork in Australia, but you can get married all over the world. Mark and I had kind of joked about the idea of just eloping in Hawaii. More so, I joked about eloping in Hawaii. But you can get married anywhere in the world on this visa as long as you enter Australia first before you get married, and then you have to apply for the next stage of the visa. Mark and I got married on the 1st of October, and we waited up until the 15th of November to make sure that we got as much paperwork in as we could. My visa technically expires at the very end of this year, and once that expires, a bridging visa will kick in. But we applied for the next stage of the visa. So this section is going to be talking about the new partner visa, the partner visa that's following it, and honestly, it's frustrating to deal with. So the partner visa that I applied for is actually technically two visas in one, but I might have to reapply for one of the visas again later on, and it's a little bit complicated. So the first visa is called the 820 Temporary Partner Visa, and the second visa is called the 801 Permanent Partner Visa. The permanent partner visa gives you permanent residency. Typically the way this works is you apply for the 820, eventually they look at it, they approve your 820, and then 2 years from the day you applied for the 820, not the day it was granted, the day you applied, you're then eligible to apply for the second partner visa, the 801 Permanent Partner Visa, which gives you permanent residency. And in some cases you can actually get them both granted at the same time. and that is under two circumstances. One is if you've been in a de facto relationship for at least 3 years, or if you've been in a de facto relationship for at least 2 years and have a child together. Mark and I actually consider our de facto date the 13th of November 2019, so we consider ourselves de facto for over 3 years. But we weren't living together. We hadn't registered our relationship up until July 2020, thanks to COVID and the borders closing and a lot of offices closing. So it took us a long time to actually get the paperwork registered, even though we had been talking about actually registering our relationship months and months earlier. So we don't know if the case officer who's picking up our application is going to consider us de facto or not and eligible for that dual grant, or if I would just be granted the 820 and then have to wait until the 15th of November 2024 to apply for the permanent residency visa. Hopefully the case officers had a good day, they've had a good cup of coffee, and they're being nice. As somebody who does case officer work for my job, I can really see it comes down to personality in a lot of these cases. Some people might give you that little bit of wiggle room, say we're de facto, and approve both. Some people might be very strict by the book and say, no, since you've registered your relationship, we're going to consider that your de facto date, so you're not de facto in our eyes until July of 2020, which is when we actually registered the relationship. So we have no idea if we'd actually get the dual grant, if we would be eligible. It's going to be up to the case officer, and we also don't know when they're actually going to look at our application. So I've pulled this up from the Department of Home Affairs website, and this is how long it typically takes for these 820 applications to be approved. 25% of applicants within 6 months, 50% within 9 months, 75% within 21 months, and 90% within 39 months. So imagine waiting over 3 years for your 820 visa to be approved. I've heard from a migration lawyer that typically these are pretty conservative numbers. There's some people who've been granted an 820 in under 2 months. And I know some people with a pretty straightforward case who've been waiting over 2 years for theirs to be granted. So I'm going to get into this one very, very quickly, and that is the cost of these visas. So I came over on a prospective marriage visa and we applied a few years ago, and from what I remember, the cost was about $7,785, if I'm remembering that correctly. It's definitely over $7,500. I think that was close to the right amount. So the way this works is we apply for the prospective marriage visa, which from what I can see is the most expensive visa in the world. Not exaggerating, I think it is one of the most expensive visas in the world, if not the. So we apply for the prospective marriage visa. When we come over, we then have to apply for the 820, and there's an additional cost to that. So for prospective marriage visa holders who are then applying for the 820, we have to pay an additional $1,350 for this 820/801. Luckily, we won't have to pay any more fees at this point. We've technically applied for both visas at the same time. But if you're onshore in Australia, you didn't do the prospective marriage visa route, and you just applied for your partner visa here on shore, the cost is $8,085. So if there's anybody who says that I don't deserve any sort of benefits, including Medicare that I'm now eligible for, up yours. I just paid a fortune to this government, and I've paid taxes in the last year I've been living here. These visas are so incredibly expensive. This isn't something that people take lightly. It is a huge, significant cost, and that's just for the application fees. You also have to go through a medical check, whether you're doing the prospective marriage visa or just the 820 visa here on shore. You have to go through a medical exam, and I remember that cost me $500 American when I did it, and actually had to go all the way up to New York. There's only a few places in the country that would do it. Luckily, it wasn't too far for me. I mean, nothing wrong with a day trip to New York, but there are some people who, say you live out in rural Iowa, you're gonna have to fly probably like somewhere in California maybe in order to find a doctor who is able to do this. There's only a couple of them in the entire country. Same thing here in Australia. You can't just rock up to a GP's office and ask them to do this. There are only so many offices that are able to handle these type of health examinations. There's only so many medical offices that are allowed to handle these types of health exams. So it involves a lot of cost, it involves a lot of planning, and it does involve quite a bit of time. Now, what some people want to know is, now that I've applied for the 820, what are the benefits? Am I able to travel? Do I have Medicare? Do I get Centerlink? There are all these questions that people have asked me about this. So first, in regards to traveling. So currently I am on a prospective marriage visa that expires at the end of the year. If my visa isn't approved by the end of the year, I will automatically put on what's called a bridging visa A. and the bridging visa A doesn't allow you to travel. If you're going to travel overseas, you then have to apply for what's called a bridging visa B, which does allow you to travel. So if I get the bridging visa B granted, I can travel in and out of Australia as much as I like until my 820 is reviewed and granted. Once my 820 is granted, I am also free to move around and travel as much as I like. The only caveat is when they are ready to approve the 801 permanent partner visa, I have to actually be on shore for that. So if you're traveling overseas, it's best to kind of let the department know what's going on, where you're going, the dates you'll be away, just in case they do want to approve your visa. Remember, they can also look this up by your passport number and whatnot, but it's also best to just let them know where you're going, let them know when you'll be offshore and when you'll be back on shore again, so that way they can look things up, they can approve the visa as needed, so that way you are on shore and they know that you're back on shore when it's time for your visa to actually be picked up and approved. I'm really, really hoping we don't have to wait until June in order to my visa to be approved, but I mean, who knows? I'm not saying if anybody knows somebody in the Department of Home Affairs, but I mean, if you do and you want to cut me a favor, no, I'm kidding. Obviously, that is very not allowed. So you can't cut queues and whatnot. You can't call them up. So as far as government benefits and whatnot go, I'm now eligible for Medicare, and I have applied for Medicare. At the time I'm filming this, it's been about 3 weeks and I haven't heard anything back, but I heard it does take about 7 weeks in order for Medicare to come through. So now we're just waiting on the Medicare card to come in, and I think it's the blue one that comes in, the one that has to be renewed every year, because I'm not a permanent resident and also not an Australian citizen. So I think it's the blue Medicare card that I will be getting in the mail. But I will hopefully have that by at least the end of January. I know it's going to take a little while coming up on the holidays, but hopefully by the end of January I'll have the Medicare card, even though I'm already technically eligible and have applied for Medicare. As far as Centrelink benefits, I'm not entitled to the vast majority of those. I'm not entitled to job seeker benefits. I'm not entitled to any sort of parental pay, maternity leave pay benefits if Mark and I were to have kids and I needed to go on any sort of maternity leave. I'm not eligible for that. There are so many benefits on Centrelink that I'm not eligible for yet and won't be eligible until I'm either a permanent resident, an Australian citizen, or I've lived here for a certain period of time, which I think the minimum is 4 years. And I understand that, that's fine. I've only been here for a limited amount of time. Being on Medicare does make sense, especially given the fact that people want a pretty healthy population, and we paid a lot to actually apply for this visa, and we pay taxes over here once we've applied for this visa. And our sponsors pay taxes when we've applied for this visa. Medicare makes sense. Not having all these other benefits, I do understand, and I completely respect that. It is what it is. We knew what it was going into it, and it's not like I'm trying to get on the dole over here anyway. I actually enjoy working. So let's get down to the last thing I've bracketed down here, which is the evidence. The evidence that you need in order to apply for this visa, because it is a lot. It's invasive. There's a lot of forms. You need family and friends to fill out forms. So as far as the forms go, there is a form called the Form 80, which basically talks about your character, how you've had no criminal issues, how you're going to respect Australian laws and customs and whatnot. All of that in this Form 80 that you upload along with your application. On top of that, your sponsor actually has to fill out their own sponsorship application form and link it to your visa. So I think you could do it on the same actual account. I don't know. We just did it so that way Mark has his separate account, I have my separate account, and then we just linked his account to my application, and it was just easier that way. Yeah, that you need at least 2 witnesses to fill out what's called a Form 888. So luckily we've had 4 people fill it out so far, and we're hoping to get another 2 in. And we've also had 4 people fill it out for my Prospective Marriage Visa. So you can't reuse the same people. The idea is you're supposed to be able to provide more witnesses, not just have witnesses write more about you. So we do have another 4 witnesses for this visa, and hoping to get another 2 more in. That would be ideal, having sort of 10 people total submit, but honestly, the more you have, the better. And there need to be people who've met you in real life, who can prove that you're in a genuine and committed relationship, who know both the sponsor and the applicant. So they're pretty legit forms. I mean, it's not something that's very easy to fudge per se. On top of those forms, there are also clearances we needed. Mark needed an Australian Federal Police clearance, the AFP clearance. I did one as well because I've been here for a year, and I don't know if they're going to need one for me or not. I also had the massive headache of trying to get an FBI clearance, and for some reason my fingerprints are very, very faint, especially on my pinkies. So I applied once with ink, and I got those done at the police station near me. The FBI wouldn't accept those. I did 10 different sets of cards on my own, mail those in. FBI wouldn't accept those, so I finally had to get an electronic print, take it to I think it's called Accurate Biometrics, who does them here, and I finally, after about 2 months of waiting and 3 different attempts, I finally got my FBI clearance. So I have the FBI clearance and my state clearance, so the state of Pennsylvania also gave me a clearance, which was so much easier. It didn't need fingerprints, you just fill out the form and then you get the form back in a couple of days. It's going to vary state to state depending on where you lived over in the States. But I have all of my clearances done, Mark has all of his clearances done. We also needed identity forms, so we had to both submit our passports, both submit our birth certificates. On top of that, I also submitted my social security card, copies of both of our driver's licenses, copies of his Medicare card, copies of my private health insurance card. So those are the forms that we used for identification and verification. Besides that, I also am changing my name. In case anybody is curious, I am changing my last name to Mark's name, and that means getting a new passport, which I submitted about 3 weeks ago, and I'm hoping to get that back probably by the end of December, maybe the beginning, middle of January. So when that comes in, I'll have to make a copy of that, give them a form that says my name's changed, and then upload all of that to my application as well. And then I'll have to go and change the bank cards and the bank accounts, and there's so many other things that I know I'm totally blanking out on. But there's going to be a lot more name change documents that will be submitted as well. When you're filing any sort of partner visa, you have to be able to provide evidence of what they call the 4 pillars. And those are commitment, nature of household, financial, and social. And you have to be able to provide evidence for each of these pillars. So for us, for our finances, we have a joint bank account. So obviously we provided the statements for that. A joint savings account, provided the statements for that. Copies of bills that came from our joint bank accounts. Copies of all the rent payments that we've made since I moved here. Copies of utility bills, I mean things that are as small as Netflix that we have copied for finances. On top of that, we are beneficiaries on each other's superannuation, and we're also beneficiaries on each other's life insurance, so those were provided. When it comes to social, this is when you want to start putting things about social media in there. I've put in screenshots of mutual Facebook friends that we have, screenshots of friends commenting on our Instagram pages. I uploaded a picture of when Mark was supposed to go over to my cousin's wedding back in February of 2020 that had the table card that had both of our names on it, and took a picture of that, and we ended up using that as evidence. I wasn't really thinking of it as evidence at the time, but it worked. Being able to prove that you're open and honest about your relationship and the world knows about your relationship. Yes, I even posted stuff from YouTube when Mark was in that video that we did about Oreos, which I can't believe it was that long ago. I need to get him in another video again. But the Oreo video, and I posted a little happy birthday post in the community, and a lot of you guys were really sweet and commented happy birthday. I took some screenshots of that and uploaded it. Obviously, if you're willing to share and talk about your relationship to thousands of strangers online, it's pretty obvious that you're in a serious relationship at that point. You're not hiding it from the world. Next up is nature of household, and this one feels almost a little bit too personal. Like, I was taking pictures of our bathroom countertop with both of our toothbrushes and all of my skincare stuff and his razor, and pictures of the inside of our shower that has little shower caddies with like his and hers shampoos and conditioners and body washes, and his Solvo and my cleansers and stuff like that. So there are a lot of pictures that were included in this, including pictures of our closet that have his clothes on my side, his clothes on one side, not his clothes on my side. His clothes on one side, my clothes on the other. Pictures of our bed that show both of our bedside tables that just have different stuff on them. Pictures of our fridge which has pictures of our friends and family posted on it. There is so much that we tried to include to show that we have completely combined our households together. And it was a little bit trickier to do given that I came over here and didn't really have anything other than my clothes and like cosmetics and perfumes and knickknacks. There was only a few things that I brought over. I didn't bring over huge pieces of furniture. It wasn't like we were combining 2 households necessarily. It was more taking my stuff and combining it with everything he already had. We needed to show that we were really able to combine these things, especially because until we have a house, we don't plan on making any big furniture purchases or anything like that in the near future. There's also Amazon purchases and Kmart purchases and Target purchases. I like shopping online, you guys. So all of those that came to the house under his name or my name, all of those invoices are in there. We took pictures of mail, pictures with mail my name, mail with his name that shows the same address, Some of them we actually had mail that was addressed to both of us, which was so much better for the visa as well. But all of that mail was provided. We also have copies of our joint lease together, copies of the rent payments that we made together, so we have those rent invoices as well, along with the actual payments from our bank account that we included in the financial section. And the final pillar was commitment. Obviously, we recently got married, so we included the marriage certificate, marriage photos, pictures of our honeymoon in Hawaii, all of the tax invoices from our wedding, everything from the celebrant to the cake to the dress alterations. On top of that, we have screenshots going back over 3 years between calls from WhatsApp, messages through WhatsApp, messages through Facebook Messenger. We have the Tinder conversations, the very first conversation that we ever had on Tinder. We have screenshots of that as well that were on there, which looking back was actually kind of cute and kind of funny. But yeah, so we even included the Tinder conversation to, again, prove that this was our story, this is legitimate, and we've been together for over 3 years. And finally, the last thing we had to include were relationship statements. So Mark had his, I had mine. His was kind of brief and sort of broke down the dates and a little bit of an explanation as to why each date was important. Mine went above and beyond, including pictures and a lot of like the emotional fluffy stuff that, yeah, I write as a hobby, so if you're going to give me the chance to write my story, I will take as much room as I can to write the story. So including pictures, that came up to about 18 pages, single-spaced. His was 3. So we have both of our relationship statements, and we included a separate relationship timeline as well, from the day that we first started talking all the way up until the day we applied for our visa. Yes, we included that in our timeline as well. We have all that included in a timeline, and I'm talking first date, the first day I said I love you, the date that we moved from Tinder to talking on WhatsApp. There's so many dates that we included in there, including dates that we were supposed to take vacations together. Mark was supposed to come to Philly in February 2020, but had a near-fatal motorbike accident the day before he was supposed to fly out. On top of that, there was the day that we applied for the Prospective Marriage Visa, the day that the Prospective Marriage Visa was granted, the day I came over to Australia. All of these dates that make up part of our story were included in this timeline. Having a timeline is key. It helps so much, especially for the case officer to clearly see how your relationship has evolved and that it is currently still evolving. So that's it for this video, you guys. I can't think of anything else to include in this. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Either I will do a short little Q&A and address them, or I will just answer them in the comment section. So if you had any questions about this, let me know down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, if you found it useful, if you learned something new, hit the like and subscribe button. It really does help support me and help support this channel. And I will see you guys in my next video.